Welcome back to Gun Toting Minnesotan. Today I'm reviewing an optic sent out to the channel by Discovery Optics. This is their ED ELR 5 to 40 by 56. It is a side focus with illuminated reticle, its first focal plane, and it actually has a 35mm tube. But I'm just showing you the unboxing right now so you know what you're getting, because with Discovery, man, they do a great job of sending plenty out in each box. Let me start with this. So you have a checklist, so you know that there's a quality control component to this, which is really nice. I think it was a good addition that Discovery added, so you can see what they're checking over and to what degree it passed and how it did. And there's some handwritten notes in here as well to give you an idea that this individual is actually looking at this optic and making sure it qualifies for their standards of quality control. Okay, you have your 3 sunshades, just like some of the other unboxings that I've done. I'm just going to take out one and tell you something. The reason that there are 3 lengths of sunshades here is not necessarily that you would attach all 3 together and make a gigantic, 13-foot optic with the sunshade and all this crazy stuff. It's actually so that you can customize the length of sunshade that you need. So you could either just use this one, which is a little longer, or you could put 2 together and be slightly longer yet, or just one and have a more normal length sunshade. So they include 3, which is great. So if you screw one up, you have plenty more, I guess, too. Some of the accessories that they throw in here. Here's your instruction manual. If you've never set up an optic like this before, this details how to set it up, how to get it zeroed in. There's lots of necessary information in here. It's just going to tell you about the sighting in process, because some people are new to this, and I still think this makes a lot of sense. There is inside typically as well a little information card. I misplaced mine because I've already been messing with this, but the informational card tells you about the data and specifics of this optic, so that you can know, how many mils of internal elevation, what kind of features this has, so you just don't forget. And if you're a novice, that's a useful thing to have as well. The scope itself comes with a mag ring assist, which I'll be showing you in a little bit, but it just threads in right there. Doesn't come attached. The rings. Now, the rings that they send out with a lot of Discovery optics, not everything, but a lot, are going to be high rings. And the reason that they go with high rings versus low is that high rings fit on more rifles than low rings do. Sometimes with a 56mm objective, okay, that's a pretty big boy. With a big 56mm objective, 35mm tube, an optic that's configured this way, you might run into clearance issues with low rings. So the most serviceable and most applicable pair of rings for ARs or bolt guns is going to be a high pair of rings. And so I think this makes a lot of sense. And quite frankly, you're not even paying for it. At this price, you should just be happy that anything extra comes. This is a nice little throw-in, so you're basically ready to go. When you take this optic out of the package, you're ready to get it on a rifle and get it zeroed at the range. These will certainly service you just fine. Even if you want to upgrade, you could start with these. And they are Picatinny, by the way. Oh yeah, here it is. So here's the informational card. I think this is cool. It just has some of the stats in there. I'm going to tell you that it will say 24 and 17 MRAD. I found it to have just slightly more than 24 and 17. That's probably the most functional range. And the glass quality is going to be the best at 24 and 17. If you go beyond that, you're pushing it beyond the extremes that they recommend. Even if you find that it has like 24.5, and this is true of all the Discovery optics, if you find it has a little bit more range of travel, it's just not recommended that you push the optic beyond that. One thing that would be cool on this card is in the future, if they could have the reticle here with a schematic and the subtensions and the values of the subtensions, such as the size of the dot and those kinds of things. I think just for novice or new shooters, this would be a really cool addition to this card. But as it is, I think most companies don't include something like this as an extra, and it's a good idea, so I appreciate that. Most of the Discovery optics that are like this, long-range optics, have a leveling kit included inside there. That's useful whether you use it or not. It's kind of a cool idea if you have Picatinny. You do have your tool. Okay, so there's an Allen wrench in there. And, of course, your lens brush and squeegee. So there's different ends here. I just want to tell you that when you're working with ED lenses and better quality glass over your experiences, start with a brush. Make sure you're brushing off the big stuff and being very delicate. Don't just take your cloth and rub it in. If you take a regular gun cloth or lens cloth and you rub it in, you might be actually grinding dirt into lenses in general, and you just don't want to do that. So I'm very careful. I shoot in the elements, especially snowstorms. That happens a lot. And when I'm at matches, sometimes my bipods legs are forked up when it's leaning on a rest, and the dirt might, if I don't close the lens covers, if I don't close the flip caps rather, the lenses might get dust or dirt in there and snow. And it's happened quite a few times. And I start by very carefully dumping it and then trying to brush, and then I'll flip around and go to this if I think I can. I just try very hard to not get dirt in those in the first place, but if you do get some dust building up, especially in desert conditions for those folks out there, or maybe too much moisture, this is actually a really useful tool, and I appreciate having this in the box. Let's go ahead and take the optic out. This thing is a monster. No doubt about it. This is a big boy. So briefly, just going over some of the features as a part of the unboxing. It has a cap cover for the objective lens here, or the eyepiece, and plenty of range of travel. So if you have bad eyes, this can work fine. It's got a pretty good grip. I'm going to set this up for my eye later. Remember, this only adjusts the reticle sharpness. It's not the image itself necessarily. This is the mag ring, and it moves, on this model, it moves really nice and smooth. And remember, you're going from 5 to 40, and this one's actually not just smooth, the resistance level is less, yet there isn't a tolerance issue here. I'm not feeling anything sloppy. Let's go ahead and install that mag ring assist. Since with an optic like this, being high magnification, this is the highest magnification optic that I own, I am probably going to use that lever as I'm going back and forth between spotting. And I've already looked through this plenty. I think the reticle is most functional, probably right around 16. I can see a lot of the reticle, but it still was usable glass at those higher ends. So nice to have this and go back and forth. The turrets on Discovery Optics generally are going to be pretty darn good, especially these modern ones, guys. They're good. They line up on 0. The tick marks there are accurate to the witness line. I appreciate that. These are not lift to operate turrets. They are not capped or locked, so they do move freely, but it takes some effort to move them, which is a good thing. As you can see, you can reset these to 0 by loosening up those Allens, lifting up the cap, and then putting it back down. And they're a pretty big housing with that aggressive texture on there. It does have a 0 stop, so I'm going to go all the way down to bottom here. And all the clicks feel the same. They feel really good between the windage and elevation. Really good. I'll go ahead and let you have a listen. Very tactile and clicky, obviously. I like that. Big numbers, big identifiers, and one really unique thing about this, I just think everybody should know, is when you get to ELR type optics, or 5 to 40s, or 50 to 60 power optics, they tend to be either 1/8 MOA or 1/20th mil. This one happens to be 1/20th mil, so you can get really, really fine adjustments. It's twice as fine as a regular 1/10th mil optic, and I'm excited to put that to the test because you can get a really sharp 0 or really, really, really tight correction. Parallax wheel here is large, and it actually goes up, let's see, it goes up to infinity by a few increments here, but there's a big gap between 25, which is the lowest, and then you're going to be up to 50 right there. So from 25 yards, very usable. That means it's excellent for air guns, 22s, things of that nature, where you might take some closer shots. And even if you're going to take a shot a little closer than 25 yards, all you have to do is back off that magnification. It's going to work all right for you. Parallax wheel is very, very large and oversized, as is the illumination rather. The illumination knob is huge. Sorry, I dropped that. And this is where your battery would go and put your cap on. And here is, yep, that's very clicky and tactile. So it has 6 settings with off in between. And I'll comment more about the brightness quality in a little bit, but that's the way to do illumination for sure. You want those off in between stages so you don't have to cycle through the entire set. just to get to the one that you want to be on. You could, in a hunting scenario, just leave it off, and then when you see movement, you could turn it on. Depends how long you're going to run it and what kind of brightness you're dealing with, what kind of light settings you have for your scenario. Nice and tactile and lands neatly. It doesn't have any mush in it. Good aggressive texture. Again, 56 millimeter objective, which is going to complement this really well. It's going to need all the light that it can get, and so they've gone to a 35 millimeter tube, which gives you just a little bit more internal elevation, as well as this longer body possibly helps with light and the trueness of light coming through. Resetting the zero and the zero stop is pretty painless on modern optics, and thank goodness, because I do it a lot. So this right here is a tool from home, but remember, it comes with the Allen wrenches that you need. So as long as you have your box with you, you're going to have everything you need to get the turret housing off. And I don't have to back them all the way out, just enough to remove this massive oversized cap. Thing's huge. There's your zero stop, and it's going to run on the same Allen wrench size. Thank you for doing that to Discovery. It's a great design feature. I wish that everyone else would do the same thing. Sometimes you'll see different sized Allens needed. I just don't prefer that. So your turret itself is going to twist counterclockwise, which means your zero stop itself needs to go clockwise until it stops. Right in here, I think you can see that in the camera, there is a little stopper. There's a little ledge that this is going to run into. So I just push it clockwise. And sometimes I'll actually leave a little breath between the two if I want to be able to go down below my zero. Because I'm shooting in inclement weather a lot, and Minnesota is just cold a lot of times, and then the next day it could be 35 degrees or something after a cold day, I leave a little breath there to move back and forth in my zero stop. It doesn't throw me off, and it's very easy to just dial it back to the zero. It's the way I prefer it, especially shooting NRL 22. You can see that with the turret, there's a little underscore here. There's some baselines here so you can know which revolution you're in. That's kind of the old school way of doing it, and it works pretty well. So I'm going to go ahead and get my cap lined up right on zero. Make sure it lines up on my witness mark. I'm going to hold it in place and get one set. Start moving around. They don't need to be torqued down really hard. Finger tight is plenty enough. Even with me going back and forth from warm weather, cold weather, I don't find that these back out. Just setting them to a reasonable finger tension. Then I like to go ahead and test for function. Make sure I hear that zero stop, and I am just, a click, a 20th under my zero stop, and that's going to be fine. That's going to get me close enough. Actually, I am, let's look at that. Yeah, I am 1/10 below with my actual zero stop. So that gives me 2/20ths to play with there, which is great, especially for NRL 22 or target shooting when I want to be really precise. Days like today where it's a little warmer than it has been, it'll give me just that little bit of extra correction if I need to go underneath my target at zeroing distances. Here's how the turrets sound. Very clicky, tactile, thuddy. Everything about that feels great. All right, let's go over the features. Now, it does come with caps. This one usually has a cap over. I showed you that in the unboxing, so I'm just going to go to the actual diopter here. It's about 17 degrees out. Usually when it's this cold, things do start to get a little bit more firm or stiff. And the tolerances are still great here. The texture really helps me in this cold weather to get a good purchase on there. It's the same uniform texture on each dial or knob or turret. Lots of room for travel and correction for the reticle. Again, that's what this does right here. This diopter adjustment is for the reticle to make that tighter and sharper for your eye, and that works well. Let's move on to the magnification lever here. Now, this is an important point. It does not run into my bolt knobs. This is a CZ457, so I don't have a 90-degree bolt knob, and I don't have the biggest throw on here, but if it was interfering, all you would have to do is remove your magnification assist lever here. That's really easy to do. I like that they all come with a nice, generous sized mag lever. I don't think that the tension is overly firm, but it is a pretty big move to go from 5 power if you're looking for a big field of view. You can start using that reticle really well around 10 power. I think it's an excellent reticle right up at 18 power. I think the glass, the capability of the reticle, you can do so much with it at 18 power. So don't think that because it goes up to 40 power that the reticle is going to be unusable as a first focal plane at these lower magnifications. Actually, I think they did a really good job, a really good job of not making the reticle too fine or too big, which is so hard to do, but it's smooth. The mag ring itself is smooth, and even if it was just a little more firm, which it's not, you have these little pyramid structures on here, like meat tenderizer pattern, that's what I call it, and that moves just fine. But the mag ring assist lever here that I'm grabbing onto helps me move between that fluidity. You know, it's a big range from 5 to 40. It helps me move pretty fast. Okay, so obviously I am using the Discovery rings here. They're high rings, and that helps me clear underneath here because I have a 50 MOA base on this, and I hesitated to do that because that's a little more than I would recommend with an optic like this. 50 MOA, obviously it's doing it. I have a 50-yard zero. I'm accomplishing that even with supersonic ammo. So that's cool, but I am pushing the glass pretty far, in my opinion. I think closer to a 30 MOA base is going to be more optimized for the glass quality and just the characteristics of the scope. But I pushed it to 50, and it has a really nice image when I'm pushing it out to the 300-400 yards, 500 yards. It has a great image because I have the capability to get out there, and I have a large range of travel. The taller rings here do set me up a little higher. I have less mirage, heat mirage because of that to some degree coming off the barrel if the barrel does get, fairly warm. And I don't have interference from this 56 millimeter bell, which I probably would if I went down to lows. I think because of the length of the optic, if I had low rings, I think I would interfere even with this Area 419 rail. So mediums, probably just fine. You could go with mediums and survive this, and it would probably even look a little better in some people's aesthetic opinion. For me, I don't mind sitting on highs most of the time. It's just a matter of fitting it in bags with a pistol grip and maybe a bipod still attached, who knows. So the rings, they work. They're going to get you out shooting, and obviously I've used them to success, and a high degree of success. I had some really nice grips today. All right, as you can see here on the parallax wheel, it's a very large, oversized parallax wheel, and it goes down to 25 yards, which is great for NRL 22 and most airgun shooting as well. I prefer at least a 25-yard minimum parallax on all the optics that I have that have parallax. The next number is going to be 50, then 100, then 200, 500, and infinity. And it's going to go pretty quickly from 500 to infinity. There's not a lot of distance between those numbers there. I think most people who are shooting this are probably going to do either pretty far shooting with it and use it almost like a second focal plane high mag optic, or they're going to do close range, really small group shooting with like rimfire or air guns. That would just be my guess at the way most people are going to use this. And obviously this is not going to limit you from doing either. The illumination is pretty bright. I would call it, like a dull day, you could still see it out there. It might not be desert bright, but very few illuminations are on the market daylight bright, and I just don't need that, especially with an optic like this. That just doesn't go together for me. It wouldn't make sense to have really bright illumination. Not necessary. It's tactile. It has the same grip on all of the levers again and knobs. It has a distinct on and off. So with those 6 settings, you can go from night vision to something a little bit more appropriate for dusk, which for me has been right around 3 or 4, and as high as 6, which again it's decent for a dull day like today. The optic is pretty long, and it's going to be, if it's going to be done well, it needs to be a little bit longer so that light is getting transferred through properly, and it's up to 40 power. So you don't want to try to make a 40 power that's this concise. You want it a little bit longer. You want light to come through, and it's just easier to make a longer optic and have light come through a little truer. I think manufacturing wise as well, parts and materials, just to get those light colors to line up properly, and so that you don't get chromatic aberration. Now these lenses, it does use ED lenses, and that's a big deal. I would not want a 40X that didn't have a minimum of ED lenses in it. Another component that I think is a big deal is this 56mm objective. It needs to let in enough light that you're not going to have extreme darkening of the images. It's going to get darker no matter what, and the field of view is going to, almost collapse on you, because that's just how it is when you go up that high in magnification. That's not necessarily a problem, and it's not uncommon to have a lesser field of view. There's some special things that manufacturers can do to get a wider field of view, but you might give up a little bit here or there with that calibration, and then also the price is going to skyrocket. The fact that you can get a 5 to 40 power, and I'm going to say at 36 power, it wasn't too dark. I think the eye box was still usable. At 40 power, I would limit that for spotting mostly. I did do some shooting at 40 power, and the eye box is going to be a little bit sensitive, and it's probably going to darken the image a little bit. It's just the nature of the price point and materials that you're working with. It's not abnormal, and I don't even criticize that at all. But 36 power, I could still use it in there. 32 power was getting better, and 28 was really, really good. But about 36 power for some really fine shooting, small groups, that was a good capable range right there. Probably a max of 36, and like I said, spotting at 40, which 40 power, man, that's pretty good. You can spot quite a bit. It's just going to be a matter of a lacking field of view. It's worth pointing out, if you didn't catch it earlier, that these are 1/20th of a mil instead of a single 1/10 of a mil clicks, and it's 5 mils per revolution. And so I have about 20 available with this 50 MOA base. There's 5, 10, 15, and just a hair over. So there's 20, 21, 22, and I wouldn't push it past that at all. I don't think it's useful, and you're not going to get the best image anyways. Just be happy with what you get out of it for elevation. I think that's perfectly serviceable for most of the shooting that most people are going to do. In fact, it could take you very far with a decent caliber. 22 mils is probably pushing the limits of the glass, the angles of everything. I just don't think it's going to be as good of an image. Optimized, a little bit more around a 30 MOA rail, that's where your best image is probably going to be.